So I think sometimes it's really rooted in a misunderstanding of history.
Richard Breaux, an associate professor of racial and ethnic studies at UW-La Crosse and a board member for the La Crosse Historical Society, says it was initially a battle flag for Northern Virginia.
It represents the Army of Northern Virginia, in the early portions of the U.S. Civil War. And then it's not until about 1863 it becomes increasingly popularized, and so it then is not symbolic of a segment of the Confederate Army as it becomes increasingly associated with the Confederacy.
Breaux says many people don't know the details or distinction in terms of the history of the Northern battle flag of Virginia versus when it was adopted by the larger Confederacy.
But they do know that it came to represent the Confederacy, and it came to represent those people who were opposed to the Civil Rights Movement. For that reason, it represents racism in the minds of many people. I would argue it's not very different from something like, a swastika.
Breaux says when it comes down to it, the meaning of the flag boils down to its context.
One only needs to watch civil rights footage in terms of civil rights protests, attempts to desegregate lunch counters, attempts to desegregate the University of Mississippi in terms of James Meredith. I mean, those are all things where, again, people use the Confederate flag as this symbol of opposing any sort of equality for African Americans.
Breaux says a number of people who identify as a person of color find the Confederate flag offensive.
As a person of color, I think that's very oppressive and offensive and unnecessary because there's no need for it anymore because this is 2020, not 1860 something.
It's like freedom of speech, but freedom of speech is not the same as, as impeding on somebody else's right.
At a recent protest in La Crosse, a truck passed by waving the Confederate flag. Breaux has a theory that some people don't see it as a symbol of racism or segregation and choose to display it in an act of rebellion.
When it shows up at a protest, or at a counter protest in La Crosse or in Kenosha or any other place, one has to really begin to wonder whether the people who have it really understand its meaning, because in their minds, even they may see it as representing whatever freedoms they have as a U.S. citizen or as an American citizen, but they may not be aware of the fact, or maybe they are aware of the fact and they don't care.
Breaux says tough topics like these are important to discuss.
I think there's a lot more listening that needs to happen. I think we're in a political climate where everyone wants to be right rather than to be empathetic, to listen, kind of take things to heart and try to understand where someone is coming from.
In La Crosse, Lindsay Ford, WXOW News 19.